I don't know. I'm ignorant. I appreciate the admission that's the case.
Only way they would have any freedom. So that whole idea of God's a benevolent God depends on where you live, depends on how old you are, it depends on who you're surrounded with. But for most people in the world who barely get by, who barely have enough to eat, life is not loving. And the whole idea that they could even begin to believe that God is love and then to say, oh yeah, but by the way, I know your life has been hell on earth. And hey, there's good news. You're going to live forever somewhere. And if you think this has been bad, it's going to be worse. But you know what? God's going to receive the glory. It would be better if there were no God. But again, maybe I'm missing something.
Yeah, evidently, clearly missing something in a major way. Because I don't see... How does your quote-unquote free will theism solve any of this? Because, again, unless you're an open theist, God saw all this coming. And God set it up, but it's not to his glory. That's the only thing you've fixed, is it's the exact same outcome. God has the exact same knowledge. And, well, but he didn't have any purpose in it. Had no intention to glorify himself or anything else in that. So even my suffering, I can't take, as Christians have taken down through the years, down through the centuries, when Christians suffer, they do so with this deep confidence that there is a reason that God is causing all things to work to their good, which is to the glory of God. Remember, their good and the glory of God are actually the same thing, but their good could include the suffering of disease and an infirm body and persecution. I mean, there are Christians. I'm going to be preaching at Apologia on the 13th, and I'm going to be preaching out of Hebrews chapter 13, the classic passage on the persecuted church. And we are to consider ourselves bound together with them, as if we're in prison with them. And everyone, I hope everyone has seen the transcription of one of the recent sermons before his arrest of the pastor in China, and his discussion of just the otherworldliness of his perspective that gives him joy in the midst of being separated from his wife and his children and his friends and his family. All of that, they consider what they're going through to be glorifying to God. That's the most important thing to them. God is being glorified in what I am experiencing. And that means the world to them. And here you sit there with Andy Stanley. Well, I better be an atheist. Wow, Andy, I wouldn't want to have to answer for that. I wouldn't have to answer that. Better to be an atheist, huh? Just go back to better if there was no God. Okay, well, there you go. Stunning. Okay, we press on.
Well, I mean, this gets into theodicy, the problem of evil. Yeah. And I'm sure reaching people that are unchurched, just as the things you deal with quite regularly, of people asking, Andy, if God's good, why are there so many people suffering? Why is there so much pain? Right. How do you begin to even respond to those
to which I could say, hey, you ain't seen nothing yet. Hey, at least you go get a cup of coffee. Once you die, it's just pain and suffering and torment forever. So, that should be the Calvinist answer. Pain and suffering? Are you kidding me? You ain't seen nothing yet. Right?
Well, wait a minute. How is that the Calvinist answer? Why isn't that your answer? Do you no longer believe in hell? There's no eternal punishment? What do you mean? Again, unless you buy into open theism, where God goes, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Then you're stuck. There's no way out of it. How is this an answer to anything? How is this an answer to anything? Hold on just 1 second here. Someone who calls himself Luis de Molina on Twitter has said that the card dealer is God, which is, of course, impossible. Because if God determines the content of middle knowledge, then it's no longer middle knowledge, and it cannot constrain God's actions. So he has a quotation evidently from Molina. Through his natural knowledge, God comprehends himself, and in himself he comprehends all the things which exist eminently in him. And thus the free choice of any creature whom he is able to make by his omnipotence. Therefore, before any free determination of his will, in virtue of the depth of his natural, i.e. middle knowledge. That's not what natural knowledge is. This is switching categories, by which he infinitely surpasses each of the things he contains eminently in himself. He sees through to what the free choice of any creature would do by its own innate freedom, given the hypothesis that he should create it in this or that order of things. What's an order of things? Does that mean that God decrees to create person X in such a fashion that he is going to act in such a way? How does that defend human autonomy? If this isn't middle knowledge, if it's a result of God's decree. And right there, it says that he should create. That's the decree. This isn't middle knowledge anymore. This loses the entire ability that Molinists think is the wonderful element of their system that doesn't blame God. Because if now God decrees to make someone in such a way that they do such things, what's even the reason of doing this whole exercise? It means nothing anymore. For it would be insulting to the depth and perfection of divine knowledge, and indeed impious and not at all compatible with so great a comprehension of the free choice of each creature, to assert that God is ignorant of what I would have done by my freedom of choice if he had created me in some other order of things. Created me, that's no longer middle knowledge. That's God has perfect knowledge of himself and that which he chooses to accomplish or could accomplish or might desire to accomplish. But that's not middle knowledge. That's not... Explain to me how that has anything to do with how middle knowledge constrains the possible worlds that God could create. Because now he can just change it. Because it's a part of his decree. Sorry. If that's Molina, then modern Molinists know anything about Molina, and Molina's stuff didn't actually answer the question. So, there you go. Just thought I would respond to that. I mean, I don't know. You didn't say who it was, so it's just a graphic. Hard to read graphic. But there you go. Okay, we continue on here. Yeah, we're fairly close here.
Well, for the reprobate, obviously. Now, they wouldn't say that, obviously, for the elect. If you happen to be
most
chosen,
people are reprobate, right?
Well, under the Calvinist
most people never hear the gospel.
Yep.
Now, again, most people are reprobate, right? We don't know percentages. We don't know when Christ is going to come. We don't know what percentage of people are going to be saved. He promised Abraham as the sand of the sea and the stars of the sky. So I don't know what the percentage is. I mean, the closest you can get is maybe broad way, narrow way. But that's more a discussion of the worldly, easy way of doing things versus the narrow way of the follower of God than it is numbers. People try to extrapolate from that and say, well, there's just, but let's back up from there. From Abraham to Christ, Pastor Stanley, numerically, how many people were sent messengers from God that gave them light that they could follow so as to obtain salvation by faith in Yahweh? The Assyrians, Egyptians, Babylonians, who received those things? Percentage-wise. That's might be one reason why Pastor Stanley wants to unhook us from the Old Testament. Let's not worry about that. Let's not go there. That might be one of the problems.
Odyssey, for example. Why is there evil and suffering? Why is there struggle? And of course, free will is the basis of our theodicy, is that God has created us with the freedom of the will, and that's why there's suffering, that's why there's pain, that's why there's a fallen world, and that's the basis of our theodicy. If you take away free will and remove that and put everything under a divine decree, determinism, then that theodicy goes away.
Well, glad to have it being put straight out there. You can either have God in control of all things, glorifying himself and working out his purpose in his people, or God has sovereignly capitulated. And it's all because of man's free will. How? If you want the mystery bucket, listen to Leighton Flowers explain how God can know for certain all future events in light of autonomous free will. I would argue he can't. I would argue that he can't. If you actually believe in autonomous free will, God could not. The open theists are right. If autonomous free will exists, God could not know what people are going to do. And if God does know what people are going to do, autonomous free will does not exist. I agree. The open theists are right. But there's a difference. And so the theodicy of Leighton Flowers and Andy Stanley becomes an anthropodyssey. Because the existence of evil is not a part of God's good purpose. Lamb slain from the foundation of the earth, any of that type of stuff. No. It's because of man. All because of man. And so the best God can do is to bring out secondary good, not primary good, secondary good. To try to work external circumstances to try to, what shall we say, milk the most good out of man's mess? That's pretty ugly. That's not pretty ugly. That's ugly. That's really ugly. And there you go.